This first story comes from the Netherlands. Even though I can speak and write a good amount of English, I want to first apologize if there's a lot of grammatical and spelling mistakes. I also want to apologize if this story may seem cliché. I'll talk a bit about myself first before I move on with this story. I live in a pretty busy and big neighborhood, and weird things rarely occur here. Sure, there have been some robbery attempts at a few local stores around nighttime, but that's all happened a few years ago. Before and after that, this neighborhood has been quite a safe place. My neighborhood is like a very big circle. It contains a playground, a football field, a small field to walk your dog, a basketball court, and an elementary school. During the day, it's totally packed with children and their parents, and people who either play football or basketball, but when the evening falls in, the streets become totally vacant. This place used to be sort of a rendezvous point for a very small group of drug dealers, but that number has since died due to the local police driving around here frequently. Since then, the attempted robberies have also died out. This place consists of a lot of apartment complexes. Myself, I live in a regular house, in a small street which leads out to the highway. Presenting myself, I'm a 17-year-old boy. I'm 6'5", but I'm pretty skinny and pretty weak. I've never been in a fight before, and I always try to seek the best possible way to avoid trouble. I have 2 cats, and my back door consists of a cat door. That thing makes hell of a noise when it slams shut though, and it always scares the crap out of me. There are a lot of stray cats walking around here stealing my cat's food, so I hear that cat door slamming pretty frequently. Our back door is made out of wood, but has a huge glass window in the middle so you can look outside pretty easy. Our living room has a glass sliding door, but we rarely ever open it. The main area I want to focus on is my quote-unquote garden. My garden is relatively small. Within 5 huge steps I can make it from my back door to the end of my garden. We have a backlight that turns on whenever movement is detected. Adjacent to it is a very huge field, which is kind of property to the long row of apartment complexes standing here. The people who live here come and go with their scooters and bikes. The back area and the streets are separated by a locked gate surrounded by a wall. I can peek over it rather easily, so with a good speed and power you can just climb over it. It's like no big deal. Our backlight turns on when my cats walk by sometimes, or when someone from the apartment just rides along. I find it rather annoying, but I have to deal with it. The gate's lock has been broken now for a while. Some morons who leave to go to work or either to go back home leave the gate wide open, or they just push it in its closed state or don't lock it with their keys. The smallest amount of wind can knock the gate wide open again. Around a month ago, I was walking home from my girlfriend's place. It usually takes me to walk around 5 to 10 minutes to reach her home and vice versa. It's separated by this highway. While walking to cross the highway, I suddenly had a very eerie feeling. I couldn't really make out what the eerie feeling was, or why I got it. The least I could say is that my guts told me I should be on the lookout for something. I mostly leave my girlfriend's place around 11 p.m., which means for 90% of the time, I'm walking out alone in the middle of my neighborhood. I crossed the highway and looked down past the elementary school, and I noticed a black car parked on the nearest parking lot. Weird. It wasn't really that far away from me too, so I could see that someone was still in their vehicle. In the car sat a man who looked pretty young. I would guess maybe around 25 years old. Couldn't be past 30 though. He was looking straight at me with a blank expression on his face. He didn't even look away or blink for a second, which really started to creep me out. My gut feeling started to act up again, so I decided to book myself right out of that street I was walking in. By passing a corner, I broke the line of sight with that guy, and around 5 to 10 seconds later I hear an engine start to rev up in the distance. I tried my best not to turn my head to look what was coming around the corner. My eye rolled to see that I was getting chased by this freak. Unfortunately, luck wasn't my ally, and I noticed the car rolling up very slowly behind me. His headlights were off to conceal himself as much as possible. He didn't try to catch up with me or to surpass me to drive off. There was still a certain distance between us, but despite that I started to panic slightly, started to speed walk my way home. When I arrived close to my house, I sprinted to my front door and smashed that door closed. My parents noticed I was in a little bit of a shock, and I told them what had happened. They didn't think much of it, but they demanded that I would return home a little bit earlier just in case. Before I went to bed, and around 15 minutes later, I slightly peeked through the blinds, and I noticed the same car just standing there in the street. He was stood around another corner, but it was just enough to see the front of his car. I don't know if he saw the blinds moving or not, but right when I peeked at him, he drove off. Since that time, I haven't seen or heard anything. A few weeks go by. My parents went to a party with my sister, and I returned home from my girlfriend's a little bit earlier, probably around 9:30 this time, and because it was early, I thought I would game a little bit until my parents came back home. It was a Saturday, so I could expect them to be back around 12 p.m. or even later. I was ready to play some Counter-Strike with a few friends on TeamSpeak until I heard some noise. I heard a lot of meowing and hissing, so I just assumed it was one of my cats, or even a stray, so I just ignored it. I proceeded to talk to my friends until not so much longer after that I heard the same noise again. I noticed my backlight was flickering a few times, so that meant at least something was going on inside my garden. I took the headset off my ears and listened for a while longer. This time, I knew it wasn't my cats, as I heard a loud thumping noise, and I noticed that my backlight was flickering a few times, so that meant something was in my garden. I took the headset off my ears and listened a while longer. There it was again, that same thumping noise. I decided this time I was going to investigate. I assumed something had gotten knocked over from all the noise. I proceeded to walk into the kitchen and turn on my light, and saw a tall figure standing outside fumbling at my back door lock. He was clothed in all black, and a hoodie was covering his face. He didn't seem to notice that I had turned on the kitchen light, but a few seconds after he noticed me, he sprinted right out of my garden into the field. I couldn't believe my eyes for what was happening, and was frozen there. After 30 seconds, which seemed like a lifetime, reality had finally struck me. I got in a pure panic and called the cops immediately. It took about 15 minutes for the cops to arrive, and they investigated the back area thoroughly. The thing that scares me the most was that they found a gun right in front of the back door. I guess he must have dropped it when he was running away. They asked me a few more questions and then left. I called my parents immediately after this, and it had explained everything. The only question I have is why the person ran away when he saw me. As I mentioned, I have a glass door in my living room, which he could easily see me through from a distance. Even all the lights were on besides those from the kitchen. Either this person tried to surprise me, or thought I wouldn't notice the noise because I was wearing my headset. We haven't heard anything since, and no arrests were made from that night. I have trouble sleeping now, and don't feel very comfortable when my parents aren't home at night. Could this have been the same person from the car? Or are my suspicions just getting the best of me? I used to take the bus everywhere. I'd go to my piano lessons downtown on the bus, and be back around 9:30 to 9:45 p.m. Unless I had missed the bus or something. You know, due to a flat tire, crazy person on the bus. Same old. One night, I missed it twice because first I was in this little store using the restroom, and the bus had passed. The second time, I literally ran out after the bus, flapping my arms, and it wouldn't even stop, even though it could have seen me waving my arms. I was sitting out at the bus stop at around 9:20 p.m. on this lonely street downtown. This guy had passed me and asked if I'd want a ride. I couldn't see his face because it was dark, but he had this deep but sweet voice. I politely declined. "Come on, it's not safe for a beautiful young girl like yourself to be out here alone." "I'm fine, thanks," I said. He said okay and drove off. A few minutes later the bus came and I happily got on. I got to my bus stop and started walking home. The bus stop closest to my house was about a 20-minute walk. I was walking down the street when I had this unnerving feeling. It was dark and much later than the usual time I would be walking, but it wasn't that. It was something else. I looked around and noticed this parked car a few ways from me. I kept walking down the sidewalk. I heard a soft noise, such as an engine to a car. I looked back and realized the car behind me was on, but I had the headlights off. I started walking faster and looked back to see if the car was driving a bit faster as well. I just stopped and turned around and waved so he or she would notice I noticed them. It got next to me and rolled down the window. "Are you sure you don't want that ride, honey?" the creep had asked. I couldn't believe he had followed me. I wanted to say something boldly and show him I wasn't afraid of him, to leave me alone, but all that came out was, "No thanks." I started speed walking at this point, but the guy sped up and parked right on the sidewalk next to me, nearly running me over. I screamed at this point and ran around the car, but the guy opened the door and grabbed me. I was only 17 at the time, and a whopping 109 pounds, so my kicks and punches against him were no match. At this point, I was sure I was dead. The next thing I know was a pair of headlights pointed straight at us and a honking, crazy sound. The man turned and still tried to shove me in his car, but was more distracted by the other car now. Somehow, it was my dad and brother. Turns out they had noticed I wasn't home because I'd always got home during this time period and just locked myself in my room. When they realized I wasn't home, they drove to the bus stop where I got down and they saw me being attacked by that man. My brother jumped out of our car so fast and came running at us. The man dropped me and tried getting back in his car, but my dad had just gotten to us, and both him and my brother proceeded to beat the guy up. My brother then took me into my car while my dad pinned the man down. We'd called the cops and the man was arrested. Long story short, he got convicted, and turns out he had been to jail before for an incident just like this to a younger girl. He had just tried to go to the next level by kidnapping me and doing whatever the hell that man would have done. I got picked up for the rest of the year for my piano lessons instead of taking the bus. And I got myself a taser and some pepper spray, and took some defense lessons. I'm pretty good at self-defense right now, but luckily, I haven't had to use it. Thankfully, my dad and brother had saved me that night. To any other creeps that waited for girls at bus stops, let's never meet.